Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Moose Podcast 293. Hey, you guys have been really communicative this week. I am really thankful. A common question is, am I going to do any more conversations? Yes, I have a couple lined up. As you might imagine, as we start getting into the summer season, a lot of my peers and friends, they're busy, and I'm afraid I am as well. So being around a microphone and getting things scheduled, that's the challenge. But yes, I've got some great folks lined up. So thanks for asking. Thanks for your support. Thanks for reaching out. I am grateful. That's why I'm doing these podcasts. It's for you, and I appreciate knowing you guys really kind of love these things. I know it's a little bit, my podcasts are really quite different from most others. So I appreciate you bearing with me as I speak out loud, which normally Sharon says should be inside voices. Anyway, want to thank also my good friends at Bedford Camera, bedfords.com. I'm not sure how they keep getting gear in with the supply chain issues that are out there still, but they do, and they keep taking care of all our needs. So make sure you reach out to bedfords.com. Use that Moose discount. That's Moose, M-O-O-S-E. You're going to save yourself 5% on whatever you're buying, as well as probably free shipping and no sales tax. Great advice, great service, bedfords.com. Remember to thank them for sponsoring the Moose Podcast. Let's get into this week's episode. Expose your emotion. Had a session with a photographer, and we got to the topic of manipulation. Now, manipulation, way back in the day, was no. You didn't manipulate your photograph. You know, you might use a polarizer, you use exposure, and then in journalism you could crop, burn, and dodge. But that was it. So the word manipulating got to have a black eye. Then we move forward to digital, and well, you know where that's gone, right? I mean, it's gone around the planet and back a couple times with new variations that have come and died and stuck. In the whole process, what was the actual end game? Why? What was going on? Well, in photography, one thing that as you know as a photographer, when you're out shooting, be it on the rim of the Grand Canyon, you know, looking at the spectacular sunrise, you're up in Alaska and you have a big moose walking across the field in front of you. You're down on the shoreline and you've got the sailboat and a sunset going by. Whatever those scenarios are, you as the photographer are taking in through all your senses all that life is presenting you. And you get emotionally tied up in it, as you're supposed to. That's really a big part of this photography thing, is that, you know, that emotion thing. And then you put the camera to your eye, as I fondly call it, the, you know, cold-hearted bastard, and you go click. All of those sensory things that are just wishing you up in the moment are all just cast aside except for your vision. And that emotional attachment that we have to those photographs is in large part why so many go back and work so diligently on their photographs in post. Well, I want to change that scenario a bit. I want you to start thinking about bringing all that sensory overload into the camera when you go click with the shutter. I want you to expose your emotion then. And I want to do it in such a way that it's so jam-packed in that photograph that you share it and it bursts out to everybody else. Now, how can you do that? How can you expose your emotion with a camera? There is lots of ways, actually, more than you probably ever thought about. And that's kind of the point. I want you to kind of think about this. Now, I have talked about this many times, many ways. I'm going to talk about it again, but we're going to add another wrinkle to it. So we have exposure. Exposure is based on basically, people like to call it the triangle. I never thought of it that way. It's a straight line for me. You have your ASA in the days of film. Now it's ISO, your shutter speed, and your aperture. And the combination of those three, you can change the exposure for what you're seeing with your eyes and your heart. Okay? And that combination, those three items, what they bring to your photograph is a whole lot more than I think photographers give themselves credit for. I like to use the scenario of a storm because it's something that's kind of universal. But we could also use a sunrise or a sunset. And I think I'm going to interpose that right now. We all have experienced sunrises and sunsets. Sometimes they are just so spectacular. They just knock our pants off. And it's like, how do you get this shot? Well, whether you're shooting black or white or color, but you can see it in color easier, which is why black and white's a challenge. You can completely change the story of that sunrise or sunset with simply your exposure. So use your camera body you always shoot with. Use the lens you prefer. And inside that body, everybody is exposure compensation, or EV control, as people like to talk about it. But exposure compensation, if you're an aperture priority, what it's going to do is you're going to select the aperture that you want for the depth of focus you desire. In this case, for me, the lens would be wide open. You can underexpose that photograph. Now, when people think of under and overexposure, they think of technical terms. And that's logical. That's how almost every book and instruction manual talks about exposure compensation. But we want to use it to expose your emotion. If you're looking at that sunrise, and if you experience a sunrise without a camera plugged to your face, which, if you're a photographer, is really hard to do, and you watch the way that sunrise or sunset evolves, you will see that it goes from dark to what you might say normal exposure, and then to overexposure. So the sunset and sunrise on its own goes from underexposure to right on to overexposure. And in that process, we get caught up in it. You can change, though, that under, normal, and overexposure that's occurring naturally from that moment in your camera. So, for example, underexposure. I always think back of one very particular sunrise out of Bosque del Apache. Singular cloud above the pond. And long before the sun was up, this cloud just lit up. And if you looked at it with your normal eye, you'd say, wow, that's kind of cool, but it's really dark. Me being me, I took the shot and I underexposed by almost 2 stops, 1 2/3 stops. In doing such, I set the blacks really down, but I got that highlight to be this gorgeous orange. As the sun came up, the scene went away. And you can't help but feel that southwestern romance from that severe underexposure. That wow that I was feeling and everybody around me was taking in was brought to the picture. Another example that I like to use would be Mesa Arch in Canyonlands. Have you ever been there? It's a panic zone. I go there anymore, and I stand in the back. I just watch the panic because to me, it's hilarious. Everybody's trying to get this photograph as if they don't get the photograph, the world's going to end. And the sun hasn't come up yet, and there's pushing and shoving, and people are trying to get a shot, and they're rah, 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 rah. And Sharon and I sit in the back and watch. And then the sun comes up. And as soon as the sun's above the horizon, people just, they vanish. They're gone. And we have it literally to ourselves. You can stand anywhere you want, use any lens you want. But then people go, well, gee, the sunrise is gone. And why take a picture? Well, actually, when you expose for your motion, even though the sun is gone up above the horizon, it is also behind the arch. You actually don't see it. So you can expose any way you want. I typically expose right on. And that gives a horrendously beautiful, vibrant, fiery glow under the arch that people look for, that they get there at sunrise. But as the sun comes up, the sun hits the wall under the arch, and that's where the arch gets its light from. It's reflecting. And so when the sun's up, it's hitting that wall directly, bouncing that arch. It's just blowing out, glowing, and boom, easy click. So exposing for your motion is kind of a twofold event. One is you have to look at the light itself and make the judgment call. Is this light starting to tell the story? And then you have to say to yourself, how do I want that light to tell my story for this moment? That's where exposure comes in. So using that storm analogy, I like to work so much. Standing in one spot, one camera, one lens, there's the clouds. You can underexpose that scene, whether you're shooting black or white or color, it doesn't make a difference. And all of a sudden that storm is looking like it's just wreaking havoc. It's just, you could take a photograph, same photograph exposed normally, and it looks like the storm is coming in. And you can overexpose it a tad, and then you can make it look like the storm is on its way out. So just by changing your exposure, you can take a scene and expose for your emotion for that feeling of that storm and share that with others. And the examples go on and on. And remember that underexposure, one, you've already paid for it. It's in the camera. Two, when you underexpose, you're going to push blacks to their blackest, giving things a black edge, tricking the eye to seeing things as being sharper than they really are, which is why I'm shooting wide open the majority of the time. And then you're also bringing up color saturation. And you're doing this with the device that's capturing the most data to give you the biggest and best file for you to have the best possible end result. Because if you're trying to manipulate this file in post and bring this in there, it can only work with as much data as the camera has captured. So if you capture all that data, all that emotion, you expose for your emotion at the time you go click, you have a better image, you have better prints, and you have the satisfaction of truly bringing your emotion that you felt to your photograph and sharing it with others. But wait, there's more. Because in this exposure equation, that triangle people like to talk about, the one thing that gets left out the majority of the time is the hardest part of this whole process: white balance. Yes, most folks love to work their white balance in post, and that's totally valid. My point is that white balance is part of that exposure equation, not only technically, but to expose for your emotion. And you can do your own test. It's real simple. Go to a scene, start cranking up the white balance when you see red in the sky. So you see red in the sky, take that white balance and take it and manually go to the Kelvin setting and set it to 6,000 Kelvin, 8,000 Kelvin, 10,000 Kelvin, and look at two things. Don't look at just the color, because that's what we tend to do. Look at the amount of information being captured. Now, I'm not saying that if you're shooting something that should be done at auto white balance, it's basic daylight and there's no red in the sky, and you crank up the white balance, you're going to have more dynamic range. It doesn't work that way. It has to be there in the first place, and the light that's coming in there. So when you see red in the sky, you have more light bopping around, and when you raise that Kelvin, you now start having more information, especially in the highlights. That's the first benefit of when it comes to working white balance, to expose for your emotion. But more importantly is that we're such color creatures. I mean, we just suck up color. And when we're out and we're experiencing the world, that color just permeates us. It comes pounding in. But being humans, we have some weaknesses. One of them is our, you could say, color memory or photo memory. It's been proven by Stanford on their robotic research that we have about a 20-second visual memory buffer. I mean, all you do is watch one of those criminal cases or the classes where there's a bunch of kids in a classroom and the lecturer is talking. All of a sudden, these kids come bursting in the door and they go bursting through the class, go back out. And the professor says, okay, write down a description of all the people who just came through the class. You can see how faulty our visual memory is. So if you're looking at a scene with your eyes, you've recorded it. Look at the scene for about 20 seconds. You've recorded it. Then if you take that photograph and you start, and that scene has changed, like a sunrise or sunset or anything, and then you look at your LCD on the back of your camera for more than 20 seconds, you just replace the reality memory that was in your memory buffer with what you see in the LCD. And then you get back to your computer monitor and you look at that image on your computer monitor for more than 20 seconds, and then you've replaced what you had from the LCD that replaced the reality. Now, you got to ask yourself, is this really important to the end photograph? I think it is if you want to stay true to your emotions. If you're exposing for your emotion, both technically and physiologically and emotionally, then yeah, it's important to get that white balance correct. Now, where do you go to practice this stuff? I know I'm going to get that email. I often do get that email. Where do I practice this stuff? I love that. Always the stuff. Anyway, practice it at home. You have sunrise and sunsets at home. Practice at home. You don't have to have a photograph that you're practicing with turn into a 24 by 30 print. You can take any picture anywhere and start learning this for yourself. You got to remember, it's your emotion. You're going to expose for your emotion, not for mine or what you hear from anybody else should be. It should be yours because it's your story, yours that you want to share. I just want to encourage you because it's not going to cost you any money. You're going to have fun. Go out and just simply under and overexpose and change the white balance and watch what happens to your photography. You won't believe how it will change the way you tell your story. And that's what this photography is all about, is the great miracles and wonders that we are so fortunate to see, bringing those back and sharing with others. You guys have a great week. Thanks for stopping by. And remember to make every click your story.